Thank you for joining me once again. I've been looking through my YouTube analytics on my YouTube Studio, which is a completely different app than what you use to watch videos. And I've noticed that there are differences in the analytics between the YouTube website as far as what it shows you guys for the views on every one of my videos compared to what I see on my YouTube Studios. So on my YouTube Studio, on average, most of my videos have more views than are being displayed on the actual YouTube website. So I found that very interesting. So I decided to go through and check the rest of my content and the media that I've put out, and I realized that some of my videos have been deleted. I climbed to the top of a mountain in East Hampton, Massachusetts. That video was deleted. It had all kinds of panoramic scenery and all of that in it, talking about the flat earth. They deleted that video. There's another video that I made addressing the mud floods, and that video got a lot of attention from people that aren't necessarily part of my subscriber base, and that video was deleted. Now mind you, that video had over 400 views and it just disappeared. It's quite a bit of views for somebody who has a channel as small as mine. So today I'd like to remedy the situation and see if YouTube takes the same steps that he did to silence me as the first time. So we are going to go over the mud flood, and we are going to go into detail about it a lot more than I did last time. So for those of you that aren't familiar with what the mud flood is, or how it pertains to our history today, I'm going to enlighten you. Apparently, there's a series of events that happened throughout our history where entire civilizations were buried under tens of feet of mud. And you can see a lot of this evidence all over the world today, especially in cities on the East Coast like Boston, Philadelphia. You can see it in San Francisco. You can see it in Chicago. It's almost as though it's indiscriminate. So this event happened all over the place. And what's even more interesting is it happened very recently in the grand scheme of things. So we're talking the 1800s, right? And a lot of people don't even realize that this happened. It's almost like it's been erased from history. Now, this event ties into Tesla on quite a few levels, and it also ties into an ancient civilization that's not mentioned in any history book. But if you actually start doing your research, it's very obvious that this civilization not only existed, but this civilization was much more advanced than anybody would give credit, okay? And according to what I've read and seen in pictures and documents, this civilization had the ability to produce energy the same way that Tesla describes in his theories. Now, before we get into depth as to what was actually going on as far as the mud flood, how it took place, why, and what it means, we have to address Tesla as a historical figure, because there's a lot of anomalies when it comes to Tesla. His entire life seems to be a mystery, and not only that, it's almost as though Tesla never really existed. Now hear me out here, I know this sounds crazy, but if you think about it, Tesla lived through the 40s, did he not? Yet we don't have one audio or video recording of Tesla. Why is that? Not only this, all of Tesla's writings just happened to disappear after his death. And nobody other than Donald Trump's uncle was the one to have access to these writings. And more or less he said nothing to see here, and it just disappeared. Now, there definitely was something to see, and I'm very convinced that the government is using those writings and that research. However, I'm not convinced that Tesla is who we are told he is or actually exists. So as I was telling you, the civilization that existed in our past, that they say it was based out of Russia, like the Moscow, St. Petersburg area. That's why you see all those very unique buildings out there with all the different colors and the points and all of that. I don't know what they're called off the top of my head. that's tied directly to this civilization's architecture, the Tartarians, I believe. So, if this civilization existed, right, and for some reason was wiped off the map, wiped out of our history, their technology would have had to been explained to some degree, right? There's gonna be remnants of it. You can't just wipe out an entire civilization, all of their scientific findings, etc., etc. You're gonna have to find a way to dismiss it as lunacy while still having it be there, because there's gonna be people that remember it. Now, after 1 or 2 generations, it's very easy to lose track of what happened if there's no written record of it. And anybody trying to make a civilization's history disappear would burn or destroy everything that told us anything about that civilization. Now, a lot of you are telling me that this is impossible. However, I'm going to point to the pyramids as an example. Now, we are told that Cleopatra's era built the pyramids, right? However, if you do actual research, the founding of the first McDonald's is closer to the birth of Cleopatra than Cleopatra's birth is to the pyramids, okay? We don't know anything about the civilization that built the pyramids. We don't know what they were used for. We don't know anything, okay? There's no recorded history of it, none. So who's to say that the same thing didn't happen with Tartaria, okay? Now, what I'm thinking happened is they attributed all of that technology that was destroyed in the mud floods, right, to Tesla, and they dismissed it as lunacy by introducing Edison into the equation and taking us on an alternate route. And I think this is why. So if you had access to the ether around you to produce an infinite amount of electricity, and if this civilization was doing that already, how do you monetize it? Okay, now you have to think, if there's a thriving civilization like Tartaria out there, there has to be a competing mindset. Think of the modern day today. We have capitalism, and then we have the socialist system, which is what the rest of the world uses, whether it be communism or socialism. They're pretty much the same thing, right? So there's 2 competing ideals. Okay, and on top of that, every technology can be used for good or bad. It's all in the application of this technology, correct? They introduced Edison in order to use a different means of generating the same energy so you can gain monetization off of it. Now, in order to do this, you have to destroy this civilization and erase it from history. Now, how are you going to do that? Well, what if you figured out a way to use that technology against Tartaria, okay? Now, think about the United States. Think about how we have our electrical grid set up right now. What is our number 1 weakness according to the national security? All it would take is 1 EMP set off over Colorado or something, if it was strong enough, and you could wipe out the entire electrical grid of the United States, crippling us. Now let's draw this back to Tartaria. They had the ability to draw energy out of the air using Tesla technology, and this worked with frequencies and energy. That's exactly how this technology worked. It worked by tapping into certain frequencies that allowed you to harness the electrical energy all around us. Well, what can you do with frequencies? You can do a lot of stuff with frequencies. Frequencies are known for regenerating our DNA. You can listen to certain music that has certain frequencies, and it's scientifically proven to repair our DNA. Well, the complete opposite is true as well. You can take certain frequencies and you can harm DNA and shatter it. Now, you can apply this to the physical world around us as well. So you can take certain frequencies and make a glass vibrate till it shatters, can you not? Now, if you do the same thing with sand or liquid or mud or anything like this, you can turn it into a liquid state. It's very easy to turn sand into a liquid state if you match a certain frequency. And basically what this does is it liquefies the sand, turning it into a liquid. It acts as a liquid. It may as well be a liquid until that frequency stops. So, if Tartaria's opponents, their nemesis, their enemy, figured out a way to harness their technology and use it against them, would it not make complete sense that you could harness that technology, create a frequency that would turn all of the ground around those cities that are using it into liquid mud and bury those buildings? Those buildings didn't get buried by mud, they sunk. Okay? And if you look at some of these buildings, it's obvious that they didn't get hit by a mudslide, because there'd be damage done to these buildings. If you look at any mudslide that's happened in California, what happens when that mud hits a building moving down a hill? That building is destroyed. However, we don't see this when it comes to the mud flood events. We see buildings buried perfectly up to 2 stories, okay? And I don't want anybody sitting here telling me I'm crazy for saying the mud floods are real. The evidence is there. You can go look at it. Go into Boston and explain to me why you have windows underneath street level, okay? Explain to me why underneath street level some of these buildings have brick next to the ground. That's not how you build a foundation. You don't use brick. They were using flagstone for foundations back then. You would never put brick with mortar underneath the ground because of the thaw and freeze cycle in the Northeast. However, in Boston, you see brick underneath the ground with mortar, and it causes havoc on these buildings. It causes absolute havoc. They have to be repaired all the time. Nobody in their right mind who is an engineer would ever do that willingly. So as I was saying, you watch any mud come down the side of a hill and hit a building, it shatters these buildings. So it's a logical assumption to say that these buildings sank. Also, there are a lot of these areas that have evidence of mud flood events happening that have no means for this mud to be flowing to begin with. There's no elevated terrain in the topology around them, or the topography, sorry. So what I'm saying is there's no hills for this mud to flow down into these cities to begin with. Look at Chicago, for example. Where are the hills for that mud flood? They're not there. So that tells me this mud didn't flow. Rather, the ground was turned into a liquid. These buildings sank. The frequency was turned off. And bam, that's exactly what happened. Now, if you look at a lot of these pictures that were taken right after these mud flood events, there is a complete lack of an adult population, okay? And a lot of people find this as an anomaly because there's a lot of orphan trains going around too, almost as though there's a lot of children who no longer have parents, because there were children being taken all over the United States, as well as all over Russia, as well as all over Europe, on what we call orphan trains, and they were being brought to these areas to dig these cities out. These kids were being used for manual labor to dig these mud flood cities out. There's pictures and evidence of this happening. Where did all of these adults go? Why are all these kids sitting here being abused and used for child labor? Where are their parents? Now, like I was saying, there's 2 opposing civilizations. You have Tartaria and the powers that should not be that exist today, right? The system that we live in today was created when Tartaria fell. And Tartaria was a worldwide civilization because the architecture is all over the world. And it happens that the mud floods take place exactly where this architecture was. So what this is telling me is this technology was being used all over the world by the same civilization that existed all over the world. And at the same time, all over the world, this civilization experienced mud floods. What's the only logical explanation for this? Now that we have all these kids as orphans and there's evidence that they're all around, like you can clearly go see pictures of orphan trains, kids being transported all over the country on trains. It's It's there for anybody who wants to see it to see it. Why are all these kids parentless? They're parentless because their parents were out fighting a fucking war. That's why. Their parents were lost in a war between Tartaria and whoever took them out, aka the powers that be today. All of this sounds crazy, yet all of this seems to be backed up by research that I have done, and if you take the time, can go confirm. I'm not one of these people that are going to sit here and hold your hand and explain everything to you with sources. You can go do that work yourself, because it's there for you to see. I speak truth from my own research. It's up to you to figure out whether or not I'm right. I don't ever think I'm lying. If I present it to you, it's because I believe that it's true through the research I've done. Now the question you have to ask yourself is, what does this mean in the grand scheme of things? This means that our entire history is bullshit. When I have black and white pictures of men on a battlefield in full suits of armor from Russia from the 1800s, there's a problem, my friends. We diverged at that point in history when the mud floods happened. At one point in time, there was a civilization on our planet that had harnessed wireless energy, that had given it to their people for free, that had as close to a utopian society as you could possibly have. And all of that was destroyed in order to make way for capitalism and profiteering. And what happened as soon as these mud flood events took place? You see the robber barons come into the United States and monetize every single natural resource there is, from water to oil to the air you breathe. That is why this is important. They have hidden our history from us because they do not want us knowing that we have already done what we are trying to do now, which is turn this world into a place where everybody can live free from tyranny. We lost this fight once, okay? And we're fighting it again, but this time the script is flipped. It's time for us to take the technology that our system has given us and use it against them. And you want to know how I know this is possible? Because they did it to us with the mud floods. I appreciate you guys listening, man. It means a lot to me. These videos may seem crazy, but this is the truth that I have found, man. And it's scary because at 29 years old, the fact that I know for a fact everything I was ever taught is meaningless, that's a scary realization to wake up to, man. And it's amazing how much digging you have to do to find even a basic understanding of what happened. There's so many questions I have about the mud flood, but what I just presented you is the pieces I can put together. I'd appreciate any comments, any theories, any critiques, man. Like, constructive criticism is one of the best tools in life. So if you think I missed something, tell me what it is. I appreciate your time. Have a great day.